Hi, and welcome to The Curling Show, the podcast that brings you interviews with the sport's top athletes and the people who shaped the game. I'm Dean Gemmel, and in this edition of our summer series, we talk to a builder of the game while he enjoyed the slightly less hectic schedule of the off-season. A Monktonian and the president of the World Curling Federation, Les Harrison, welcome to The Curling Show.
Thanks very much, Dean. Pleasure to be here.
Hey, glad to have you. Since it's not curling season, I'm sure you're just relaxing and enjoying the summer weather free of any administrative duties, right?
Yeah, I wish. Curling's a full-time business, since we've got into the Olympic Winter Games now, and with all of the other events that are going on throughout the year, plus the functions of meeting with winter sports federations, all the other groups that are involved in Winter Olympics, running events and meeting with the IOC, it's pretty well a year-round business. I try and take maybe 5-6 weeks off, which I'm on a little hiatus right now, but in effect, even though I'm taking a bit of summer vacation, I'm working pretty well at least a couple of hours every day, 7 days a week probably on curling.
You're in a job that's a magnet for criticism, that kind of job, but I've heard really nothing but positive things about you and the job you're doing. So kudos to you for that. But give me some background on Les Harrison. What were you doing before this job, and give me some history.
Well, I'd be happy to tell you a little bit about myself. But first of all, I'd just like to make a little correction in what you said. It's not a one-man show. Running an organization like the World Curling Federation is a team. We have about 8 or 9 staff people that are working with us. We're in the process of hiring one new person. And we have 7 other board members of the World Curling Federation. And our board is not a piecemeal board that sits there and just makes decisions. They're boards that members that roll up their sleeves and they have actual job tasks to perform. And an organization this large takes a lot of teamwork, and I give credit to all the people that are working for or with the organization in making it what it's become today. From a personal perspective, I get asked all the time, people say, how do you get to be president of the world? Well, it's fairly simple. It's like politics in a sense, where you start small, you start in your own local region. I started back 30-some years ago, working in my own club, working on competition schedules, doing teaching, new curlers, coaching clinics, went on to marketing seminars, and then went on to the board executive and became president of my own club, which was the Beaver Curling Club in Moncton, New Brunswick. Following that, after a year off of working, I worked for 2 years on the Labatt Brier in those days. 1985 was held in the city of Moncton, and I was the vice president, and that year I was in charge of 4 major areas of responsibility. I had accommodations, I had banquets, receptions, bars, and the Brier Patch. So with all of that work, that took a couple of years, and then I went on and they asked me to work on the New Brunswick Curling Association, our provincial body. I worked with them on competitions and ran provincial playdowns leading to the Brier and things like that, and then went on to their executive, became vice president, and worked my way through the chair and was president in the early 90s. During that time, I was attending Canadian Curling Association meetings with the member associations from across Canada. Had the opportunity to meet a lot of those people, and after my term of office expired with the New Brunswick Curling Association, many of those people were encouraging me to run at that time in 1996-97 for the board of directors for the Canadian Curling Association. So when the Calgary Brier came along in 1997, the annual general meeting of the Canadian Curling Association was being held there, and I threw my hat in the ring, and lo and behold, got elected and served 6 years on the board of directors for the Canadian Curling Association. While I went to my first meeting in June of that year, the CCA was looking for somebody to represent Canada on the World Executive. Well, I was an air traffic controller by trade and had worked in the aviation industry as a controller and did many things, and was a manager of training and human resources and all of those sorts of things, and in my latter stages of my career, and I was looking at retirement but still enjoying my job. But with the World Curling Federation opportunity and also serving Canada on the Canadian Association. It became a bit too hectic, let's say. It wasn't working in a job where I was my own owner of the business and couldn't afford to leave it anyway and spend the time that I did on curling. So anyway, I went back home and retired and was elected to the World Curling Federation in 1997. So I'm now starting my 12th year. I was elected in Lowell, Massachusetts, just up the road from you, in 2006 as the president after serving 6 years as vice president, and have finished my first 2-year term and was reelected this year in Grand Forks at their annual assembly, and we're now on my second 2-year term as president. So a little bit of history there.
It's sort of an overnight success story, really, Les.
Well, not quite overnight. I'm going back to...
I'm kidding.
Let's talk the late 70s.
Yeah, so, no, I'm kidding. That's a lifetime of organization.
I know, a lot of years there.
Hey, let's look back on the WCF events of last season, starting with the Ford of Canada Women's World Championship in Vernon. Attendance in the arena might have fallen a bit short of organizers' hopes, but the TV numbers in Canada were huge, and we saw a new level of parity in world curling. What do you take away from that event?
Well, yeah, Vernon, you mentioned maybe a little bit on slow getting started out there, but we must remember that it was Easter weekend. The Masters was on television. There were all kinds of competitions running against the opening weekend and the startup of Vernon, but they finished strong. They really were like a racehorse and came on about midweek, and the crowds picked up, and the arena was full through to the end. So a great success story, and they certainly ran a wonderful show there in the city of Vernon in British Columbia. And you talked about the parity. You talked about the Chinese teams, the Japanese teams, and those ladies teams, and how they've improved their skills, their technical abilities in the last few years. You have to remember, folks forget that China really has only been curling for about 5 years up to that point, and the phenomenal success that they've had in the Pacific, starting from scratch, working their way up and training some elite athletes to perform at world-class levels. And don't forget, they beat the eventual champion was Canada, but Japan beat them in the round robin. They beat them in the 1-2 game. They
China.
really lost the one important game, and that was the all-important medal game on the Sunday afternoon. So great for the sport and great for the Pacific region. We, in the last couple of years, have been working very diligently with NHK, which is the national broadcasting system for Japan, and we had the Women's World the year prior to in Japan, and NHK came on board finally and showed most of, pretty well all of the Japanese games while the tournament was in Japan. Well, lo and behold, they sent a whole crew over to Vernon, and they picked up the broadcast, and they broadcast every game of Japan back over to that country, and they've had phenomenal success with their numbers over there. So all in all, I'd have to say Vernon was an A+.
Touching on that viewership for just a minute, though, there were some problems for people outside of Canada who were trying to watch games from Vernon online, maybe only here in the United States. And then there were some complaints, most of them uninformed, I'm afraid, about the lack of broadcast coverage from the Men's Worlds in Grand Forks. I'm just a bit unclear about what sort of contracts the WCF has with various broadcasters and online partners. Can you clear things up?
Well, it's a convoluted issue that we're working with. As you know, when we're in Canada, we have the CCA has been our marketing agent in the Canadian broadcast area for a number of years. And when we have the one of the championships, as we alternate men and women in Canada each year, when we do that, it has been a contract with the Canadian Broadcasting System in Canada, who has had the contract for curling up until and including this year. They do not wish to go offshore and do events throughout the week, i.e. when it was in Grand Forks, it's quite an expensive operation for them to send crews and everything down into the States and their camera systems and all of the paraphernalia that's required to produce the show of the caliber that we require to get curling on the air. It's a very expensive proposition. Curling at this stage, folks have to remember that curling is still a very small sport in the big world of sports. We're not hockey, we're not basketball or baseball, we're not football, and we're not golf. We don't have our own channel. We can't afford those kind of things. We're not in the mode yet of receiving funding from television companies who are willing to come to us like they do in hockey, and they put money into a pot to help broadcast hockey and other sports on the air. So we're not at that stage yet. We're still in a major growth market, even though curling is a very enhanced and large viewership in Canada. Outside, it certainly is not to this stage. We're growing slowly. We're growing through the internet, and people must realize that it's much cheaper to broadcast on the internet, certainly, than it is to produce a television show and find a network that'll pick it up and carry it. So it's all a matter of dollars and cents. Until we get to the status of some of these other sports where television is willing to cough up a few dollars to help pay for the cost, we are funding that. And I mean the WCF. The World Curling Federation this year is spending just about $2 million US dollars on our broadcast, and that's only 3 events that we telecast. One is the European Championships that's held in Europe, and we broadcast that on Eurosport. That's where our market is at the moment, is all those countries in Europe. And Eurosport actually can go out to about at least 56 different countries in many different languages and promote curling for us. And that has proven to be our major growth area in numbers of countries that have joined the World Curling Federation since we've become an Olympic sport. So our focus has been primarily to get television in Europe, and we have to pay for that. So we do the European Championships, which is vital to them to show different countries over there. Then we do broadcasts from the Canadian men's, or the World Men's and the World Women's Championships throughout the week. And all of that put together comes to about a $2 million bill that we have to fund each year. So if our money comes generally from the IOC, from the Olympic Winter Games, we work on 4-year increments of when we receive the bulk of our funding. The bulk of that funding that we get, if we go the 4 years, there's $8 million of that has already been spent on television. And that doesn't count what we spend sometimes on internet and other issues. So it eats up a large amount of the money and the income that we're receiving at the moment. We only have 2 major sponsors. One is Ford of Canada, and the only sponsorship they do is the men's or women's curling event when it is held in Canada. And then we have Le Gruyere, which is a cheese company in Switzerland, and they provide some funding to help us with our production and broadcast costs from the European Championships. So we get very small return for the $2 million expense that we're spending out. We've just been in the process of signing on a new marketing firm we're quite excited about. It's called Infront, and they are a Swiss company who deals with pretty well all of the Winter Olympic sports. And now they have curling in their stable, and we're hoping for great things from them that will really drum up sponsorship money, funding, to help support the initiatives that we have in bringing curling both to television and the internet.
The thing that I think most curling fans don't realize is when you pointed out that curling just can't sell a rights package yet, like a lot of other sports networks, and just have them cough up money. Just on behalf of my American friends, though, do you have any inkling of why a lot of people in the United States seem to have trouble with the CBC feed? I don't know if that's just something different entirely or what.
And I'm not sure of the answer to that either, Dean. Right. It's something maybe we could look into. But CBC, as you know, or may know, for your American friends particularly, the CBC contract in Canada is now terminated, and we have a new working agreement with TSN, the sports network, which has an affiliation with ESPN in the States. And they are starting this year with the world broadcast, and we'll have to wait and see how they are going to work through the internet scenarios and what other issues that we can bring to the table through our marketing firm with Infront to help get better and increased, particularly internet coverage, because, as I said, it is so much cheaper to broadcast via the internet than it is for television. So that's one of the ways we're hoping to go.
I look for good things with TSN. I do hope they improve their online media player because it's not very good right now. So hopefully they work on that. Hey,
right.
We talked briefly here about the new landscape with teams like China and Japan and Russia doing very well in the women's level and the men's level too, I guess, China especially. But you also talk about the fact that really they have one or two elite teams, and it's troubling to some of us that they may end up as the top teams in the world from countries without any curling club culture. Does that concern the WCF at all?
Well, it does concern us to some extent, but you have to realize that it is all one thing, it is all one issue, and it is the allure of going for gold at the Olympic Games. And that's why governments are willing to fund athletes that will have any opportunity of performing and getting the opportunity to win any type of medal at the Olympic Games. And that's what the view, I think, that China and probably some other countries have done. They're not willing to put government money into funding, building a local curling club, into the communities that help people to have recreation facilities. That is the way that in Canada and in some large degree in the United States that curling has developed a grassroots system before it developed an elite system. China and some other countries are looking at it in the opposite way because now that we are in the Olympics in the last few years, it's changed the whole focus. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I guess time will be the evaluator and really give us the opinion on which was the best way to go. What we're hoping to do in China, and we see it now, they already have, I think it's a 6-sheet curling facility near Beijing. And they are curling in that facility. In most of the other facilities that they're curling anywhere in Harbin, example, in northern China, they're using dedicated hockey, skating arena facilities, and you can see that growth in the USA, where the past number of years, in the past couple of years particularly, when the WCF sent approximately 700 stones to your side of the border, most of that curling has not been in dedicated curling buildings or facilities. It's come in arenas, and it's come in places down in Texas and California and all kinds of states that really weren't doing any curling before. So we're quite excited about that. And, you don't need a dedicated facility to have, curling in your community. If you have an arena and can get some ice time at a reasonable cost, then the curlers normally always end up funding their own play and their ice time to get these things underway and to get the stones that they have to pay for and make clubs and join clubs and get things organized. And that's the way, that's the grassroots. And we always like to see here in Canada, too, that big basic grassroots system and build the pyramid to the top, which is your elite curlers, which are going to be curling in the Olympics. Because other countries have chosen to do it other ways, who knows? Let's evaluate it as time goes on and see how it works for them.
Well, I'm glad you pointed out the WCF and the ROC program that offered a lot of ROCs in the United States, because I know a lot of people probably think your organization simply runs international events, the elite events, and I know you do other things as well. Hey, what do you say to those who have stated that they don't think Canadians should coach international rinks?
Well, I guess everybody has their opinion on that, and, you look at football, you look at all the other things. You look at the football soccer leagues, for example, that have started now in Canada and the United States. Where did their coaches come from? Most of them not within. Most of them have had their training over in Europe or somewhere else and have brought the expertise in to do the coaching. So, to me, I think it's small potatoes when people complain that this Canadian has an opportunity to go and train. If we look at Chinese women, for example, and the Chinese men, what they've done is they've funded for their teams to come into Canada. I understand they come into Edmonton for 2 or 3 months a year. They rent apartments there for them. They join their super leagues. They play at the elite level. They have a Canadian coach who works with them. And look what it's done for them from a professional standpoint of a competitive level and how it's raised the bar for them. So, hey, if it works and it helps promote curling and drives the sport in your country, wherever that might be, then I certainly have no problem whether it's Canadian, Chinese, USA, where that coach might come from. It's teaching people to curl at the elite level. Hopefully that those coaches, when they're in those countries and working with those high-performance athletes, that they will also take the time to utilize them to work with the grassroots people In other words, train their coaches to help train others to really learn how to play the sport properly.
I agree with you on that. That you can't, Canadian coaches are probably going to be the best coaches in the world, so we need them to get out there. You can understand the human nature involved when someone, a top curler in Canada, has to work a day job and then comes into the club and sees that Team China's been there practicing all day and watching video, though. I guess you can understand some of the concerns.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I see those are the high-performance athletes that are being totally funded by their government who are actually curling 8 or 9 hours a day, and that's really all they seem to be doing. So, but they're winning medals. They're starting to win medals now, and if they were to win medals at Vancouver during the Olympic Games in a couple of years down the road, just think what that might do for their programs. Because we have to look at it from the broad picture where if the Chinese athletes, using the Chinese as an example, if they are being shown nationally on television to billions of people in that country, and 1% of that population gets the opportunity to start curling, look what it does for the sport.
It's a little different than 1% of Saskatchewan, isn't it?
Exactly right.
Hey, the Men's Worlds in Grand Forks, North Dakota, I think could be considered a success. A well-run event, pretty good numbers, I think, attendance-wise.
They had a great working committee there with in Grand Forks, and I'm sure many of your U.S. curlers know that one of the guys that was a ringleader in putting that thing together, in Don Barkham Jr., a former world champion junior. And
the always reticent Don Barkham Jr.
He's always reticent. The guy is he's a mover and shaker, and he gets things done. Some people may not appreciate some of the ways that he operates, but you have to look at the bottom line and see what happened. And things were done, and things were done right. They had the largest attendance of any curling event in history in the United States. So what does that say for it? I mean, yes, a lot of those people were Canadians who come down from south of the border, but anywhere you go, particularly in the northern part of the states near the Canadian border, if you have a world-class event or an international event of that magnitude, you're going to draw Canadian fans down because they're the greatest fans in the world. I mean, there's no two ways about it. They're curling diehards, and they'll go for a long ways to see good curling, and we don't care where the fans come from as long as they come and enjoy the show. That's the main thing, and spread the word that curling is a great sport.
Yeah, and we can. Yeah, I'm all in favor of guys like Don who speak their opinion and then also throw some work into events and organizing. So we need more people like that. Hey, Moncton, your hometown site of next year's Men's Worlds, the Fort of Canada Men's Worlds, I guess. There's some talk of an outdoor game out there. What's that all about?
Well, it's been mentioned. I haven't heard anything definite yet that this is a plan. They were looking at the possibility of maybe setting up a mini rink in front of City Hall or something, but all of the issues there are still in the planning stages, and they're in a little bit of a hiatus now over the summer, July and August, but late August they'll be the meetings will be getting back into full swing again. Not that some of them aren't working now, but they need a little bit of a downtime right now, and the weather is about 30 degrees out, so it's kind of hard to talk about curling some days when it's this warm, but for the people who aren't into it, maybe like yourself and myself, full time.
Yeah, people are obsessed with it, yeah.
But I think it's going to be a wonderful event in Moncton, and it's just a great opportunity to have it in my hometown. Like I said, I was involved in 1980, back when we had the Air Canada Silver Broom, which was the men's championship in that year, and they did a tremendous job in Moncton of hosting it. They had the Canadian men's championship in 1985 and did the Brier, and did a super job there. And in 1990, they had what is still to date the world's largest cash spiel with $250,000 cash prizes, $100,000 to the winner. And that's where as you are probably well aware, that the Moncton rule came into effect, which in effect turned out later on to become the free guard zone.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of good history in Moncton, and I think you do a great job. Personally, I hope they don't do the outdoor curling. I find those things always come off as making the game look a bit like shuffleboard, and I'd rather see, they talked about they did images projected on a wall for the Memorial Cup downtown. I love that idea, but
they did that, yes.
I think Rockefeller Center, it's just tough to do the outdoor thing. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it.
Yeah, I know.
But I'll give you that one anyways. I'll give you that advice. You can take it or leave it. But
that's good. And it's a committee in Moncton. It's not me. I'm a Moncton guy, and I'm there, and they tap into me, and I go to the odd meeting, and and try and meet with them when I can and keep them basically in the right direction from the World Curling perspective. But they have to put their own twist on it and put their own taste on it, which we want every organizing committee to do. We don't want carbon copies, everyone to be exactly the same. So
good thought. Hey, what about some of the other events on the WCF schedule, like the mixed doubles? Apart from another Olympic discipline, what's the end game with that?
Well, that one blew us away. I mean, this all started back when we made a pitch to the IOC a number of years back to look at having a singles competition in the Olympic Games as a new discipline. And about 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago when I got involved with it particularly, we did some assessments on it, and we went back to the Continental Cup, which has been a super style of competition, a la Ryder Cup style. And one of the innovations that we brought in there was the mixed doubles. And to my way of thinking, much more exciting, much more interesting, much more viewable, made for television than the singles competition. So with a lot of discussion and a lot of people's help, we went back to the IOC and we talked about putting in the mixed doubles, and we made an application, and it was turned down for several reasons, but a couple of them were, well, you don't even have a world championship yet. How could you entertain putting this discipline in the Olympics? So we went out and we put on a world championship last year, and it was in Finland. It was held in conjunction with the World Senior Championships for men and women, and it was in two arenas side by side. We had 24 entries that came in. We had 3 or 4 more who canceled at the last minute. But I think that this year you're going to see another good increase on that number because the event went over spectacularly. And the people that watched it, the people that played it, the coaches who were involved said, after watching the mixed doubles, it's going to be almost hard to go back and watch curling because this was such an exciting event with all the stones in play and the big shots coming down, and the finesse shots were superb. And like I said, it's an event that really is catering to television audience, and I think it would be spectacular on television. And now we have another one coming up this year. It's going to be in Cortina, Italy, our second event. It's a standalone. And one of the issues that I've told our people is that we have to get this thing webcasted and get it put on the Internet because people have to be able to start to see this thing, and we have to gain support to get it in as our second discipline in the Olympics. So that's what we're aiming for, whether it'll be 2014, whether it'll come that soon in Sochi in Russia, or whether it'll be 2018 in that venue, who knows, but I can see it coming in the Olympics sooner rather than later.
Well, it sounds good. I hope we get a chance to see it online next year. Hey, there are 44 countries in the World Curling Federation, a number which probably surprises many people. Any countries we can expect to see as new members in the next few years?
Haven't heard of too many solid ones, but I know countries like Mongolia has had a strong interest in the last while. We've had a lot of expressions of interest from India, of all places where you don't think they would have too many ice sports, but they do have arenas, particularly in some of the northern parts of India. Down in the Middle East, too, we've had Dubai and other expressions of interest, so who knows? People are looking at our sport. And I think, again, we'll get another kick internationally from the 2010 Olympic Winter Games. And you never know where expressions of interest and federations are going to form up and make an association and join the World Curling Federation. So what we have to do, I think primarily, my focus and our board's focus is not necessarily to try and attract all kinds of new countries and have very few curlers in each one of those countries. I think we have that number that you mentioned now already in our fold, and a lot of those are still fledgling and struggling members and don't have proper curling facilities and don't have coaching and all kinds of things that they require and stones. So I think we've got to focus maybe a little bit more on helping the countries that we have there to help grow the sport, and I include the United States in that because I think that the United States is certainly by far and away the biggest market potential that we have for sponsorships of anywhere in the world. And if we can get our sport to grow down there, that television can come online, that NBC has a real strong interest in curling, and if all of a sudden they start to put some money behind that interest, then I think our sport will really take off.
Well, as a guy living in the U.S., I like the sounds of that. Hey, finally, Les, if you've ever listened to this podcast or if George Carey's briefed you a bit before, you know I haven't exactly heaped praise on the Continental Cup. There's a new site next year and a Team World instead of a Team Europe. But I'm still concerned that it's not usually compelling sports television. So tell me why that concern is misplaced.
Because people haven't had the opportunity to see it. I think that's the issue, and I think that it's like I remember back, and I'm old enough to remember when the Ryder Cup started. You know what? There was very little interest in the Ryder Cup when it started, but look what that has grown into today. The Continental Cup has the potential to do that. The issue with the Continental Cup is whether Canada and ourselves in the United States has the funding capabilities to continue to run it till it gets to that level. And that is a big issue, and I don't know whether we can continue it. We've agreed to run it this year as the last event for now. We won't be running it next year because of the Olympic trials in Canada and U.S., and other countries are busy preparing for the Olympics, the same as we did in 2005. But we'll reassess whether we can take it forward and whether we want to expand it, get it out into other countries. We've had a couple of minor expressions of interest in the United States of hosting that event, but for the moment it's trying to get legs under it, and it takes a lot of money to help put it on. It's cost us a lot of money to keep it running, and unless it can become self-sustaining, then I don't know how long we can keep it going. But it has been a wonderful event. It has showcased different disciplines for the sport, and people are now looking at the mixed doubles and starting to play it in clubs. I know there's lots of clubs in Canada that have ice time that's not being totally utilized, and what a wonderful opportunity to try new disciplines like the singles and the mixed doubles.
Yeah, we tried the mixed doubles that way in our club here in New Jersey last year, and people did seem to enjoy it. But, just so you don't think I'm only critical, Les, I'll give you 3 ways I think the Continental Cup can be improved. Humor me for a moment. 1, you add another team to each side and make it a captain's pick. So the captain, like the Ryder Cup, has some skin in the game. With 4 teams aside, you go to 4 sheets, so the last day would have every team playing with a ton of points at stake, and we wouldn't have it over on Sunday. And finally, introduce a double-team format like the Silver Tankard in Ontario, where you have 2 teams with combined scores. There's my 3 ideas to improve the Continental Cup. Take them or leave them.
Good thoughts, and certainly we'll pass that type of information along to our group from Canada and our own group that get together and discuss and evaluate when they look at what they're going to do with that sport. We've made a few changes and tweaks to it, but maybe if we do continue it down the road, that some of those issues could be addressed.
All right, finally, Les, we end with the run back. I give you a topic, and you give me your thoughts on it in 1 to 3 words. Ralph Engelstad Arena.
Magnificent. 1 word.
1 to 3 is fine. The Scottish women playing with 3 in Vernon.
Not the best.
Rockstar curling.
Good idea.
The WCF courtesy line.
No problem with that. No problem.
I like it. I see Canadians don't seem to put it in their clubs. We put it in ours here. Impact of the wider WCF curling sheet.
Minimal.
Vancouver 2010 preparations.
Going well.
And 8N games.
Potentially 2010 and beyond.
Really? Okay. I just go back and forth on 8 versus 10, but I think there's merit in both. So.
Well, we've had discussions a month ago with the Canadian Curling Association and with the Tour Players Association and the WCF. We've agreed to make an assessment over the next year, meet next year, and plan many changes potentially to the game and to competitions 2010 and beyond after the Winter Olympics.
Well, that sounds good. I do know when I talk to players, they always find that they always remark that the WCF is an organization that does seem to listen to their concerns and listen to their input, and is a proactive organization. So good for you and your whole team, as you noted, for that. Thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of your summer.
It's a pleasure, Dean. I hope to get to talk to you again sometime in the future.
That's Les Harrison on The Curling Show. Whether you're on the deck at the cottage, on the beach, or sweltering in the city, thanks for listening.